Hello, Black Perspective Beauties. Welcome back to part 2 of Loving While Black in a Culturally Different Relationship. If you haven't had an opportunity to listen to the first part of this episode, stop what you're doing and listen to that first.
Love takes off the mask that we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within. James Baldwin.
Black Perspective.
Are you involved with a cultural other?
Was it for an advantage?
What were the challenges?
Did you find that only love was enough?
Another thing in an interracial relationship is hair care.
The maid.
Yes. I have a friend who has a relative who has a biracial child. And my friend often tries to suggest hair products that caters to this biracial child's hair. My friend often said that her hair type seemed dry in comparison to my own daughter's, and she was just curious about the products that I used in her hair. I offered her a selection of products. When she presented these options to her relative from my friend's account, the relative seemed as if they were offended. And honestly, this could have been like, hey, what you trying to say? My daughter's hair is nappy? Or are you trying to say my daughter's hair is unkempt? Are you trying to tell me how to take care of my daughter's hair? What do you know compared to what I know? So it could have been that. Or looking at it from another perspective, could it have been possible that maybe they couldn't reconcile with the fact that their child's hair texture isn't the same as theirs? The thing is, I have in the past used maybe not specifically those types of products, but those types of products from the brand. Meaning that yes, for me, Garnier Fructis doesn't necessarily cater to Black people. However, their triple moisture does cater to individuals that have a curlier hair type. So I have used those types of products before. I think as a cultural other, it doesn't really matter what side of the fence that individual sits on, as long as the individual recognizes that their daughter's hair requires a certain level of moisture.
I think the issue for me with that is the why, right? So where is it coming from? Like, is it coming from the fact that there are favorable pieces of that child's Blackness or their identity that you want to identify with, and then the other parts that you don't want to identify with that are least favorable, like hair? Like maybe that child doesn't have the, that 3C, 3A
has more
type of hair. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She got that 4C, 4B measure like me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it depends on like where it's coming from. So if it's coming from a place where like you're trying to diminish their identity, then that's a problem, because it's like you gave birth to this child. You know what I mean? So now it's yours and it's your responsibility. And yes, this child looks more Black. And yes, this child has the nose, has the hair, has whatever, those things that people like or dislike about our culture. So my thing is like, if that mother is creating a culture now where now this child is going to grow up and have some type of body dysmorphia because of things like that, then it's a problem for me, because you have to let your child love every part of them. So the Black pieces, the white pieces, and everything in between. Yeah, but I think that's a big thing, because I have seen that before. Knowing people who have had children and both of them are of the same race, 8 months pregnant or whatever. Oh, I hope my kid doesn't come out with kinky hair. And it's like, hopefully your kid comes out alive.
Yeah.
Right.
Like that you're talking about your kid coming out with kinky hair, and that's the scariest thing to you. And there's so many diseases that exist, and that's what you should be worried about. And that, to me, like, that's very normal in our culture. When people who have kids that are biracial, they're like, oh, I hope my kid comes out
and has blue eyes
Gerber,
or something.
Right, the Gerber look.
Yeah.
The Gerber baby look. You know what I mean?
This year up. Yeah.
And you're like, no, your baby might come out looking crazy. Who knows? You know what I mean? So, but you guys, that's my thing.
That's something that you need to have in interracial relationships altogether. Because, for example, I recently did have an incident with a coworker where she ran her fingers through my freshly done twist out.
Did she ask permission?
Her coworker were like instantly. We definitely made her feel awkward and uncomfortable because I don't feel like that was something that I should have had to explain. But when I told him the story, he was looking at me like, what's the problem? I am a person, like no one needs to pet me. And he was like, why are you referring to it like that? And we ended up having like probably about a 40-minute conversation on this topic. The same way that when a white girl takes the effort to go and curl her hair and she wants no one touching it, it's the same concept. Just because our hair naturally grows out of our head curly doesn't mean that you get to dismiss the fact that you touching my hair is going to mess up those curls.
Yeah.
Even so, like you touching my hair is a personal boundary. I can't just come up to you and just touch you out of nowhere, right? So in the same sense, you can't just come up to me and just touch my hair out of nowhere.
It definitely hit different with like someone that you're working with versus someone that like you are dating, crossing intimate boundaries with. Like, okay, that you're playing in my hair, like I'm going to expect that to some extent, but like that's also where it comes in. If it's intimate, you need to know my culture, my background, my hair upkeep. So you know how to play in my hair. I don't have a problem with you touching my hair, but you're not going to wait until I have a fresh blowout and start running your fingers through my thing. The same way you see that I have a blowout, you're not going to go and splash me at the pool. That's something that you should know.
That was a conversation that Bay and I actually had to have. Just for the audience, this is an adult content warning. Because I have no issues with my hair being pulled. However, there is a way that it needs to be pulled.
Yep.
Baby, you got to start from the root. You can't just be coming all hot.
Yeah.
Like my name is Molly or Becky. I have good hair. However, you still have to come at it differently. We can still get to the same point. We just have to take a different route in getting there.
I took my hair out and like, I just took these braids out of my hair. So my hair needs to be washed. So like, it's okay. But this is what a braid out looks like. And any other time that I've purposely done this, don't touch it. Like, it's okay because I have to wash this tomorrow. But like, otherwise not.
If I was going to relate it to somebody who didn't understand, as a male, do you want somebody your height coming over to you, big burly man, running his fingers through your head, talking about, wow, Tresemme? Like, no, you wouldn't want that. Like,
I was like, but that's that soon.
Rubbing on your beard, nice lineup. Like, nah.
Right. Right. Yeah. Like, oh, I like how he aired that up. Where he work at? Oh, okay. I have to hit him up.
Could you imagine?
Yeah. So it's weird. It's like you wouldn't want somebody to do that. You'd be like, hey, relax. Like it would come off weird. So yeah, that's what I use as an example.
He brought up like, I feel like I see women do it to each other all the time. And I was like, women that are comfortable with each other, like I might look at your hair and be like, oh my, like that looks nice, let me see it. And I might not wait for an answer before I go check it out. But that's also with me having the knowledge of how to treat your hair without damaging the style that you had done.
And a let me see is like a turn to the side. Like, oh girl, let me see.
I remember going to the departments like, please don't ask me if my hair is real. Please don't ask me if you can touch my hair because I'm not okay with these things.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, your hair looks so pretty. Oh my gosh, I wonder how it feels. You can keep wondering because today's not the day. We're
right.
that close. I've been chased down at a Walmart. Countryman just came and like ran his hands through my hair. And he's like, I just had to know what that felt like. And it was just so odd. I was just like, excuse you. And he's like, I'm sorry, I just need to know. But there again, you wouldn't want me to like adjust you
right.
or heal you or go into your personal space as a human being.
Right.
We as Black women, we as Black people, there's still a need of permission.
I had an interracial that was Black and white, and they were raised with their white family. And I religiously, I'll be sitting in the middle of the workday like, ooh, my hair's looking ashy. Let me put some lotion on. And they were like,
yeah.
Ew, that feels disgusting on my skin. And I'm just sitting here like, this is why you walking around ashy. Like, I feel like that's right on the lines with the hair product thing is like skincare.
Yeah.
I didn't even know it was a thing that white people had this opposition to lotion because I feel like I've met several that use lotion.
They use lotion or hand cream. Which one? Molly?
Is that from Bath and Body Works, or are they pulling out the Eucerin and the Nivea?
Right. Come on now.
So better.
Right.
I didn't realize that that was such a thing. Like he hates it. Like I'm the polar opposite because I'll have my coconut oil, I'll have my Vaseline, I'll have my lotion. Like my skin is going to be glistening. It's going to look amazing. It's going to be soft.
I was going to say, I bet if he touched on you, his thought is, oh, it feels disgusting.
Right. He's always like, why are you so soft? And I'm like, bae, I use lotion, Vaseline, coconut oil, exfoliation.
The regimen. Yes.
That was a cultural difference that I didn't think about before because I'm all about exfoliation. Bae's just like, oh, let's put soap on the skin. That's enough. And I'm like, where's the washcloth? Where's the loofah? Where's the body brush?
That might be a man thing because the guys that I've met do like using soap on skin. Like, what's wrong with y'all?
I know.
No, nothing. Even liquid soap.
Yeah.
Like, what are those? Like,
I think that is a men thing, but I feel like I've seen way too many women do it as well. And when they do, it's usually not a Black woman.
It's not a melanated queen, huh?
melanated queen.
No. You can kind of tell if you ever just walk into someone's house and when you go in the bathroom, you look around in the bathroom and you know there's like 6 people living there and not a single washcloth in the bathroom.
Right. Yeah. It's like you're not scraping that level of dirt off your skin with just
Right.
You ain't doing that. Nothing's coming off.
The bar soap help it break down a little bit.
Sometimes the bar soap has those little like round circles.
Yes,
so, you know, it kind of
beads,
can
the
get
crystal.
down on you. Right.
That's still not enough. Stop
Bar
playing.
soap that's going right into all your privates. Like, nah.
Oh, yeah, that's terrible. Whew.
Stop playing. Aisha, you talked about an incident because you are dating interracially and it was like a financial statement.
I recently had a conversation with another. Don't know how it's going yet, but he specifically made a comment that if you don't have the money to have kids, you shouldn't have kids, which in a lot of ways is like valid because you don't want the child to not have what they need, but playing devil's advocate. Like, yeah, there's a lot of parts of that I agree with and understand. But I think making that comment very much rules out our community because we are a community that has so many families living in poverty. And that's almost the equivalent to me of saying that they shouldn't be allowed to have children. And from his experience, he is not white, but raised by a white family. And I had to first ask, like, okay, you say that if you don't have the money, you shouldn't be having kids, but what about like the love and mental capacity to care for a child? Should that not be as equally important? Like, just because someone has a whole bunch of money doesn't mean that they're going to be a good, supportive family to be raising a child in. So we have these families that have that and just don't necessarily have the financial means. And are you saying that they aren't deserving of having a family of their own? That's something that I very much do think of because that's the reality of it in our community.
A lot of times when we make those blanket statements, it's definitely coming from a biased point of view, especially if you have not grown up or are privy to living in a non-traditional environment in which like a lot of people are having children that can't afford them just because of circumstances, right? They don't have access to, health services that gives them that type of information. It's a lot of pieces that go into that. Some generational stuff that goes into that, right? That kind of positions you in a way where you are continuing these type of cycles. And that I feel like that is very common in the Black community, whereas maybe in another community, it might not be a standard kind of situation. So yeah, I think that like playing devil's advocate and just opening up some more dialogue does show like, okay, are you sure about how you feel about this? What about this? And then what about this? You know what I mean? So, because you can't just make that type of blanket, all-encompassing statement because it doesn't apply.
Not a one size fits all, you know?
In the sense of even making that blanket statement, and like Bianca said, like ignoring history. We know that the CIA pumped heroin into specifically Black neighborhoods, which affected them financially, mentally, affected households. So if you're thinking of already starting from behind and then people essentially saying, well, you can't produce because you're not in a state to do better, it almost comes from a place of not knowing. Does that come from belief in what was taught in the household, or does that come from belief in what is just understood by experience?
From what we did talk about, it seemed like a lot of it came from like, that is what he was taught in the household. And also a bit of like societal norm, essentially, that I feel like that is a very common thing that is said, like, oh, if you are taking any kind of government assistance, you're not financially stable enough to be supporting a family. So I think like that societal norm kind of helps add to him thinking that's a normalized idea. Something that I also brought up within the conversation was like the cultural upbringing as far as religion as well. Mm-hmm. We know that Black culture is really big to, pray about it, but that is also a culture that is very close to their family. So the same way that someone else's parent might be like instantly think about other alternatives, adoption or abortion, I feel like a lot of times in the Black community, the families kind of push away from that. They're like, oh, someone else is going to take care of the kid, or you're going to have that support and that love, where we know the white culture is very open to like, oh, at 18, you're getting out. So like they don't have the same family dynamic overall.
Kids are younger, I'm like, they're moving out when they're 18. But what I thought of is that I was very independent from the age of 16. I was out of my parents' house by 18, and I wasn't financially knowledgeable of knowing about like credit cards and debt and things like that. And to think of how I started being in debt at a very young age and not understanding how to dispute and do all those things at 18, which I know now as an adult, that knowledge wasn't there. So that also affects you.
That was something within my cross-cultural psychology. That specifically was something we talked about so much, about how American culture as a whole is very withdrawn from their family when it comes to looking at the family dynamic in comparison to quite literally almost everywhere else in the world. We have the least amount of deep connections within the families, and then within the subcultures of American culture, like Black culture, they said that that's the one that you see more of that similarity within the other cultures that doesn't align with the American culture.
I know that my friend had a discussion with their partner, was essentially the belief at a certain age, a kid should just know how to do for themselves. You hear a lot, well, at 16, I had a job, and at this age, I was doing this. Since it's like the generation for us as like millennial parents, we know the things that worked for our childhood and the things that didn't work. And we're like, well, our baby's not going to go through that. We're going to try to safeguard them or protect them from doing that. But then there's like in this situation, my friend's partner doesn't have children of their own. So when my friend is saying this, for them, they're like, well, you know, when I was a kid, I was doing X, Y, and Z. And with that discussion that she had to have was essentially like, hey, when we were kids, this is what we were doing. However, that's not what I'm going to do for my children, because I don't want them to start from behind. I want them to actually start with a leg up. If you think about history, especially for cultural others, like they had that leg up. They had the 400 years of slavery. They had houses, property, things given to them. You know what I mean? So as a culture, at least for that friend, she was very adamant on wanting to be like, hey, I want to shift that. Even as a Black woman, I want to shift that. Like, I want to take care of my own, just like all the cultures take care of their own. Like if you think of the Jewish community, the Asian community, they help their communities and lift them up in order for everyone to be at a better place.
I think that we will see that and actually see it within our generation. I think this generation is all about establishing legacy. Like, I think that's a real big thing, probably more than it has been for a very long time. And so I do think we'll start to see more of that. Like, we'll start to see more of, for lack of a better word, like Black excellence and just like more historical advances.
I kind of brought up this example. I tried to leave race out of it as much as possible, and I started asking questions. So I was like, there's two girls, both wanting to have a child, and one of them is from a family that is able to provide the financial support, anything that she needs for the child. The other is not, and would have to either get some kind of government assistance or be living below the line of poverty, essentially, to care for her family. Do you feel that one of them, the one that has parents to financially support her and her child, should still be able to have that child? And he instantly told me yes. And in that same breath, I had to ask, okay, now what happens if her parents completely did cut her off and now she can no longer support that child? Should she still be able to have that child? This is a situation that people can easily be put in. And not once did you say that those factors would negate her being able to have a child. So do you think that the money alone is enough to essentially disregard someone being able to start a family? Yeah, whatever you were raised as might be able to help you in your life situation, but it definitely can make or break you the same way.
To be honest, those two women are in the same spot, right? If we left out the fact of her parents supporting her, they are essentially in the same spot. They're probably in a spot where they're not making that much money, because I'm assuming the woman who's getting the help from her parents is probably not working, or maybe she has, part-time or something like that, not much income. So had she not been living with her parents, she would be in a situation where she is getting support from the government or some type of support from some type of social service. But it's just perspective, right? So now, like, when you say, it looks a lot rosier when you say, okay, I'm staying with my parents, they're going to help me raise my child until I'm able to get on my feet. That sounds a lot rosier than, I'm on my own and, I'm just making it work through social service. Essentially, that's what's happening.
It sounds like in the first situation, the parents are the government assistants.
Right. Yeah.
They're the daycare, they're the government assistants. Mm-hmm. That's the same thing. So
putting your hand out for help is still asking for help, no matter where you're getting the help from.
Exactly. Whatever agency you want to use, whether it's your parents or, our government people, so you still getting the same type of help. Is somebody else's name on the text?
By the end of it, he totally changed his perspective.
When you think of Black people, Black communities, where do you see that we're winning? Like, where do you see that we are doing the work and uplifting our own?
For me, I would say a big thing that I've noticed in my adulthood that and maybe being younger, certain things are just not on the forefront of your brain. But as an adult, and you kind of see how the world is evolving, I think a big thing for us is just being our own advocates. I think we're winning in that regard. When we see things that are absolutely wrong, we are now calling it out. We're now coming together, even though it is a wave. We do a wave of that type of work. However, because of social media, because of so many avenues that we have now, we do have more advocates for change, and people are on the forefront and actually moving and doing things that are in our favor to better our community. So I would say that just like being our own advocates is such a big thing now, versus being younger. I always felt like it was one of those things where somebody's going to do it versus like, let us do it. Like, what can I do? Even if it's small, like, what can I do, to help this along? So that's what I would say. Just like definitely just being more of an advocate for change.
We can attribute a large part of that to technology and social media. I love going down the comments on Instagram and seeing something that is said and it sounds incorrect. And then you read the comments and there's actively people correcting the person. Like, hey, how you're representing this person, it's not okay. And I love that energy. And I think that matters.
Yes. I recently saw a TikTok where someone talked about a lot of things that I feel I faced growing up. And the fact that people are bringing these problems even within our community to the surface. The video was talking about how like she didn't realize how much she kind of was outcasted by the Black community because she was always so surrounded by white people. And because of that, she didn't know how to properly advocate for herself when she'd get those comments like, oh, you talk white. And I think that now as a community, we are noticing that like people have different walks of life, and that's not a bad thing. I don't think it was so much on the forefront before.
There is no talking white. Speaking proper is not tied to a
for white people.
Right, for only white people, which I hated growing up. I still get that as an adult, and I have to correct them. I'm like, no, speaking properly doesn't only belong to white people. If I speak proper, it's the way that I grew up, it's the way that I was raised, and that's me. I'm not white.
Yeah, right. And they like also were talking about the fact that like comments like from white people, those microaggressions that we now do comment on instantly, like, oh, but you're not like them. And it's like, before that was something that was so easily passed over, where now you like, no, I'm exactly like them. Like we have the same experiences in so many ways that you would never understand.
I think another shift that I've seen is entertainment. I'm a huge fan of Chadwick Boseman. Rest in peace, King.
Love him.
Seeing 42, seeing Marshall, Get On Down, seeing Black Panther, and all of those lights and entertainment. I was so happy when Black Panther came out because it was like, finally, not this movie that shows drug dealers. Like even now, watching entertainment, it's like if I see something that associates Black people with drugs or as criminals, I automatically don't watch it. I'm tired of seeing us in that negative light. Even if there's a comeback story, unless it's based on true events that happen. That's the only time. I think there's this show on Amazon Prime that's called Small Axes, and it's historically true stories. And so I'll watch that. Going back to interracial relationships, seeing people that are in interracial relationships that are also like still advocating for their people, like Donald Glover or Jordan Peele, Michael B. Jordan, even though the last person he was with was Lori Harvey. Even when he dated white women, he was still always advocating for the culture. He always did movies like Fruitvale Station or Fahrenheit 9/11. That was very much so in the forefront of showing strong Black men and then showing the stories of some of the disenfranchised, some of the injustice that they get. Ketanji Brown Jackson is the first Black woman Supreme Court justice. And it made me kind of sad on social media to see some people coming at her because they're like, oh, they only pick Kamala Harris or they only pick Ketanji just because they have white spouses. When I see the judgments and the changes that Ketanji Brown Jackson specifically is making, it's like she's still showing love for her culture. Even the Republicans accused her of being soft on crime, which we all know is code word for being soft on Black people. It's a code word that they were trying to use and saying, well, she's soft on crime, so obviously she doesn't care about people. But it's like, she does care about people. Everything that I've seen her do thus far shows that she cares about people.
And I think that's something that's also seen like in entertainment. Like you mentioned Jordan Peele. You look at who he tries to cast in his movies a lot of the time, and there's so many people coming out with movies now that they're like, I'm gonna put a whole bunch of people that look just like me in the movie. Like, and it's not even for anything other than uplifting our culture.
Chef's kiss to Jordan Peele, chef's kiss to Donald Glover as far as artwork and using their art in order to push forward a message. First of all, if you guys haven't seen Atlanta, oh my goodness, just beautiful artwork, just beautiful. My question to you girls now is, what can we do to lift up our own?
I think what we can do is, I think a big thing is just listening and be active listeners, and then should lead by example with our younger folks that, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like nowadays, our 20-somethings are more inclined to listen to us. right?
Yeah.
Than ever before. Like for sure, I know when I was in my 20s, I was not trying to hear what nobody had to say. That's because our environment was different, right? The 20-somethings of today have dealt with so much that, I think that most people have not even seen in their lifetime until as of recent, in the 10s and up. So now I think that they are more inclined to listen to people who have been here longer. So I think, but also to convey their points and, their concerns and stuff like that. So I think that definitely trying to close that gap between generations, that's a big thing. I think that is how we become, like how we lead and change.
Yes, I was definitely going to say like closing that generational gap, because I'm a 20-something and I know for me it's like also having that knowledge of seeing, like we mentioned earlier, we see that things, we know what our parents did for us that didn't work. So trying to break those generational curses, as well as still not leaving all of history behind us. Like, we're open to it, but we are also open to changing it and allowing it to evolve for better.
Keeping an open mind, educating ourselves, educating each other, and that attributes to generational gap, right? Like, we need to listen to our elders. That's one of the things from our roots, that they may not, some things might be dated, but what we've learned is history repeats itself. So there's a lot of things that we can learn from our elders when they speak to us and try to guide us. And you're right, in terms of the 20-somethings, which when you were at first saying that, I was like, I don't know if that's just more of a girl thing. I'm sorry. We're not trying to listen to our elders. It's like, no, we know everything. But it's true. When I was in my 20s, I was not trying to listen to my parents, because that was also leading up to the 20s. We weren't allowed to really question our parents. So when the 20-something was like, I know, I've heard you already. Now let me figure it out on my own. And I think since we're coming at the younger generation differently, I think they're more apt to listen, because you're right. They have so much more exposure to things. So you see young people standing up for things that it might have taken our generation or the generations before at an older age to want to stand up for and speak up for. So this is an amazing time in history for that.
Me and my mom recently had a conversation, because I was telling her, with the age difference between me and my sister, we're only 5.5 years apart. But in 2009, when we had figure session, my sister was graduating high school, whereas I was about to start high school, like 7th, 8th grade. And getting to experience that at a different age definitely showed me a different way of like growing into my adulthood. Even I saw what we went through within that time frame, being only 13 and being like, oh, okay, so if this happens again, I need to know what I need to do. Whereas my sister grew up, she was 18 right when it started, so she still didn't have a clue. Essentially, she was just like, yay, let me go blow all my money, and then realized, okay, that wasn't a good idea way after the fact, whereas I feel like it almost made me financially conscious a bit more.
Speaking of financially conscious, I think that cycling money back into our communities is a big thing. I noticed that there are Black-owned brands, one actively Black, with everything that they do in terms of their advertising and the people that they hire, the people that are their models, people that is doing their advertising. They very much so, with the profits of their product, they give back to the community. They donate bikes, they donate things for Black communities. If not only on a celebrity level, not only on a billionaire level, not only even us like cycling our money through our communities at least X amount of times like we used to, because when you think of Black Wall Street and why it was so big, it was because, you know, they were in a situation where they had to cycle the money, but because they cycled the money within each other, they were able to build and add to their community. If we could apply that logic today, buying shops that are in impoverished neighborhoods, people always tell you that there's not money there, but you see everybody but your people in those communities. So if the money's not there, then why are they there? The money is there. What I last saw in terms of statistics as far as who has the biggest power of spend in terms of like how quickly the money leaves the hands, it says like it's Black people. So just think about if you live in your neighborhood and you own a store in your neighborhood, you can build out your store in your neighborhood. You can contribute to your house, which then contributes to the home value of your neighborhood. And you do that within your community, with your friends, with your neighbors, and you create your own little Black Wall Street. Yeah, we've been disfranchised. Highways have been put in neighborhoods that have flourished. Usually when there's new highways, usually when there's needing for oil, it's usually impoverished neighborhoods that get affected the most. They're the ones that get moved. They're not going to go to the suburbs and put a highway in the middle of it. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to go to an impoverished neighborhoods where they act as if those voices don't matter as much. This doesn't only stop at you, right? It also is your partner. I know that my brother, in his interracial relationship, he's very much so still very active in like giving back to his community and talking about his culture. And they have conversations in terms of cultures and cultural blending. Even in celebration, I know for me, for Kwanzaa that we celebrate, he made sure that the gift that he got for me was from a Black owned, like they made sure that the gift that they got for me was from a Black owned business. And to me, like, it wasn't just the gift, like the gift was amazing, beautiful. I love it. Mwah. However, it also meant so much more to me that they, as a interracially united couple, decided to invest in a Black owned business together.
For me, that's important. Like, at the end of the day, in an interracial relationship, love isn't enough. If you're not going to be rooting for me the way that I'm rooting for me,
right,
like, you almost don't need to be here. So I think that's kind of what that goes back to, is like, I need you to be in support, not just of how I think, feel, and act towards things, but like, there's a part of you that needs to show that you are willing to do those same things.
That's a common discussion that me and my husband have as well. It's just like, he'll ask, like, how can I support you? And I'm like, this is how you can support me. Like, it's bigger than me, babe. It's bigger than me.
Yes.
This is what's going to impact change. And it's that friendship, it's that relationship, it's that just knowing and having honest conversations with your cultural other. It's okay to be with a cultural other. It's just, are you having the honest conversations? Are you holding each other accountable? Are you making sure that any misconceptions, regardless of where it comes from, is being addressed? Especially for me, it's like the Haitian community, the Black community, any misconceptions. The last example that I'll use is, I hate it when people are like, well, scientifically X, Y, and Z, when we know that as far as healthcare, as far as science, there's been a lot of bias when it comes to Black people anyway, right? Mm-hmm. So when people use, well, in science or statistically or medically, these are the conversations that you have. It's like, okay, medically what? Like, what are you trying to say medically? And then you break it back down, and then we have the discussions scientifically, statistically, all of that. I want to go back to my dad being like, I corrected you because I love you. If I didn't love you, I would stay silent. And it comes to that. Because we love each other, we correct each other.
I love that. And I think that's important, especially like, because we know, like, we're not coming from the same backgrounds for the most part, right? The same upbringing, and just culturally, we're just doing things differently. So I think that's important to be grounded in making sure that we all are on the same page with like how we love, how we communicate, our expectations out of the relationship, how we want to raise our families, that kind of stuff. Like, because those are your core values. And so I think as long as, you know, you're yoked in that way, I think you can have a healthy, successful relationship.
Thank you for joining us in our discussion. I don't think we got to do introductions in the beginning, but if you like everything that you hear, if you're interested to hear the ladies that are on this recording, we have Bianca over here, we got Esh, and then you have me, Molin. Thank you for listening. Just remember, love, peace, and support Black businesses.
If you're a supporter of Blacktrospective, follow us on Instagram at Blacktrospective. Our episodes are also available on Anchor, Spotify, and Radio Public.
Blacktrospective.
Are you involved with a cultural other?
Was it for an advantage?
What were the challenges?
Did you find that only love was enough?